The fluorescent lights hummed above me. As I stepped into the sterile environment of the community health center, it was supposed to be a routine checkup, a mundane task I'd procrastinated on for far too long. The waiting room had been eerily silent, and now confined within the stark white walls of the examination room. A sense of unease settled over me. The air hung heavy with the scent of antiseptic, and the crinkling of the paper sheet beneath me amplified the silence. Earlier, a cheerful nurse with a warm smile had ushered me into this very room. Her demeanor, professional yet approachable, had momentarily eased my apprehension. She'd taken my vitals, asked the standard questions, and then excused herself to fetch the doctor. Everything had seemed perfectly ordinary, unremarkable, until she returned. The woman who re-entered the room was a striking contrast to the earlier nurse. Her name tag identified her as Emily, and her youthful face framed by fiery red hair couldn't have been more than 25. Her emerald green eyes, which had held a friendly warmth before, now seemed to burn with an intensity that sent a shiver down my spine. Her smile remained, but it seemed different now, laced with a hint of something I couldn't quite decipher. As she approached, clipboard in hand, her gaze lingered on me for a fraction of a second too long, and the air crackled with a sudden, unexpected tension. "All right," she began, her voice smooth and composed, yet carrying an undercurrent of intimacy that made my heart skip a beat. "Just a few more things to check, and then you'll be all set." I nodded, attempting to maintain a neutral expression despite the sudden shift in the atmosphere. Emily stepped closer, her fingers grazing my arm as she reached for my wrist to take my pulse. The touch was fleeting, clinically appropriate, yet it ignited a spark of awareness within me. I caught her eyes flitting over me, her expression unreadable, and I couldn't help but wonder if she felt it too, this unspoken connection that hung heavy in the air. "Whenever you're ready, you can go ahead and unbutton your pants," she instructed, her voice steady but with a subtle inflection that hinted at something more. I hesitated, surprised by the unexpected request. This wasn't my first rodeo with medical checkups, but something about this felt different, more personal. Nevertheless, I complied, my fingers fumbling with the button and zipper as my heart pounded in my chest. It wasn't the examination itself that was causing my pulse to race, it was the way her eyes followed my every move. Unwavering and intense, the air grew thick with anticipation as I shifted on the examination table, unsure how to react. I glanced up to meet her gaze. Once more, this time the silent tension between us was undeniable, palpable. It was as if an invisible thread had been drawn between us, pulling us closer with an irresistible force. Emily's piercing green eyes softened as she looked at me, a spark of curiosity flashing across her face. My breath hitched as her gaze fell to where my pants were partially undone, a shiver running down my spine that I couldn't suppress. Her fingers brushed my skin again, light and purposeful, sending a wave of heat through me that left me frozen in place. The air crackled with a tension that hadn't been there before. "I'll just check here," she murmured, her voice barely a whisper, laced with a surprising intimacy. She maintained her professional demeanor, but the atmosphere between us had shifted, becoming heavy with unspoken desire. Leaning in, her warm breath grazed my skin and sending a jolt of awareness through me. With practiced movements, she adjusted my clothing, exposing the area she needed to examine, but her touch lingered, sending a thrill through me. overwhelming, building a slow burn of anticipation within me. Our eyes met, and for a heartbeat. The world seemed to stop. The silence stretched thick with an unspoken tension that hung heavy in the air like an unasked question. You're tense, she said softly, her hand resting gently on my thigh. Her touch was reassuring, yet her words held an undercurrent that made my heart race even faster. It's okay, she continued, her voice low and soothing. Just relax. I nodded, but relaxing was the last thing on my mind. The way her hand lingered, the intensity of her gaze made it impossible to ignore the undeniable attraction between us. Her hand shifted, brushing against me again, and a surge of heat coursed through me. I knew she felt it too. Her breath hitched slightly, her eyes dropping to where my pants remained undone. Her lips parted as if to speak, but no words came out. She hesitated, her fingers tracing light patterns on my skin, each touch deliberate and unhurried. I'm just going to check, she whispered, her voice barely audible, almost as if she were speaking to herself. Her hand moved again, slowly, carefully, but the clinical detachment was gone, replaced by something more. I could feel the warmth of Emily's palm against my skin, the way her fingers brushed lightly over the fabric of my underwear. A soft exhale escaped me unbidden. The sensation overwhelming the room suddenly felt smaller, the sterile walls closing in as the space between us grew more intimate. My breathing grew shallow, and the tension in the air thickened with each passing second. Emily didn't pull away. Instead, her touch grew bolder, her fingers lingering as she adjusted the waistband of my underwear. Her movements were slow, deliberate, every action laced with intention. I couldn't look away from her. My eyes stayed locked on hers, and when her gaze flicked up to meet mine, I saw it clearly. The unmistakable flicker of desire in her eyes. This isn't typical, she murmured softly, almost as though she were trying to convince herself, but her hand didn't stop. Her touch grew more confident as her fingers explored the bare skin beneath them, each caress leaving a trail of warmth in its wake. I swallowed hard, my body betraying me, reacting to her touch in ways I couldn't control. No, I managed to whisper, my voice rough, thick with the tension that had been building between us. It's not. For a moment neither of us moved. The air between us was heavy, charged with the weight of everything that had happened and everything that was about to happen. Then, as if a silent decision had been made, she leaned in closer. Her lips hovered just inches from mine, and I felt her breath on my skin, warm and soft. The anticipation was unbearable. Her hand moved again, this time with more purpose. Her fingers brushed against me, and I couldn't stop. The soft groan that escaped my lips, my breath came in short, shallow bursts as I struggled to stay still, but it was impossible. The way she touched me, the way her gaze never wavered, it was too much. You're responding well, she whispered, her voice low, carrying a quiet intensity that sent my heart racing faster. Just relax, I tried, I really did, but the way her hand moved against me, the way her fingers pressed more firmly, more insistently, made it impossible. My body arched slightly, responding instinctively to her touch, and I felt a wave of heat pooling in my stomach. It was a slow burn, impossible to ignore, spreading through me with every movement of her hand. Her lips brushed against my ear, her breath hot and teasing. Her hand slid lower, pressing against me in a way that drew a sharp gasp from my Lips, you like this, she murmured, her voice barely more than a breath. There was a hint of a smile in her tone, a quiet confidence that made the room feel even warmer. My mind went blank. All I could process was the sensation of Emily's hand on my arm, her soft breaths mingling with mine, and the undeniable heat that enveloped us in the cramped exam room. I managed a shaky nod, my entire body thrumming with a potent mix of anticipation and fear. She leaned in, her touch feather light yet purposeful. Every movement sent shivers down my spine, pushing me towards a precipice. I wasn't sure I was ready for her lips grazed my jaw, sending a jolt of electricity through me. Her hand trailed lower, fingers tracing slow deliberate patterns on my skin, leaving a burning sensation in their wake. My breath hitched in my throat, my body betraying me with its instinctive response to her touch. I've wanted to do this since the moment I saw you, she confessed, her voice a husky whisper against my ear. Since you walked through that door, her words like a spark igniting a wildfire within me. I couldn't help myself. I surged forward, capturing her lips in a tentative kiss. It was a soft exploration, a question hanging in the air, but the dam broke quickly, unleashing a torrent of desire that had been simmering between us from the start. Her hand continued its exploration, stoking the flames of my desire. The tension in the room crackled, reaching a fever pitch. We were lost in a world of our own making, consumed by the raw intensity of the moment. Her lips met mine again, this time with a hunger that mirrored my own. The kiss deepened, her touch growing bolder, more insistent. My heart pounded against my ribs as I pulled her closer, the warmth of her body pressed against mine, a stark contrast to the cold, sterile environment surrounding us. The clinical atmosphere of the exam room melted away, replaced by the icing scent of her perfume and the feel of her soft skin against mine. Our connection intensified with every passing second, an undeniable force pulling us together. Her breath hitched in her throat as she trailed kisses down my neck, each one sending shivers down my spine. My hands found her waist, pulling her impossibly closer. I couldn't fight the magnetic pull between us, the way our bodies fit together as if they were two pieces of a puzzle. Every touch, every stolen glance, every shared breath felt like a promise of something more. We were caught in a whirlwind of unspoken desires, a forbidden dance neither of us had anticipated, yet here we were, surrendering to the moment with reckless abandon. Emily's breath hitched in her throat, the words "I shouldn't be doing this" escaping her lips like a forbidden prayer, yet her voice held no trace of doubt, no hint of a desire to stop. Instead, her words amplified the thrill of the moment, painting a vivid picture of us crossing a point of no return. A fire ignited within me, and I could no longer restrain myself. Her hand descended, tracing a path along my body with a touch that was both feather light and electrifying. A gasp escaped my lips, my entire being awakening under her touch. Every nerve ending sang as her fingers explored my skin, teasing and tempting with agonizing slowness. The anticipation was almost unbearable. Time seemed to stretch each second an eternity as the tension between us mounted, the air thickening with unspoken desire. "You're making this so hard to resist," I managed to say, my voice a husky whisper. Her lips curved into a smile against my neck, her warm breath caressing my skin as she continued her exploration. "I'm not trying to resist anymore," she confessed, her voice heavy with Longing, her words hung in the air, solidifying our commitment to this forbidden act. There was no turning back. Now we were caught in the current, swept away by the intensity of our shared desire. Her fingers delicately grazed the waistband of my panties, pausing there for a heartbeat, as if seeking permission to venture further. Our eyes met hers, filled with a raw hunger that mirrored my own. I nodded slightly, granting her silent consent, assuring her that I craved this just as much as she did. The moment her fingers dipped lower, a jolt of electricity surged through me. My body responded instantly, arching into her touch, a gasp escaping my lips, echoing in the stillness of the room. She moved with a practiced grace that left me breathless, her touch confident and deliberate, each caress sending waves of pleasure through me. I tightened my grip on her waist, pulling her closer, surrendering to the intoxicating sensations. The air crackled with anticipation, each breath heavy with unspoken desires. I could feel the frantic rhythm of her heart beneath my fingertips, mirroring the rapid beat of my own. "You're driving me crazy," I whispered, my voice strained with pleasure. A playful smile touched her lips and she brushed them against my ear, her fingers maintaining their slow, tantalizing rhythm. She was a master of seduction, and I was powerless to resist, lost in the intoxicating sensations of her touch, the warmth of her body pressed against mine. "Good," she breathed, her voice a husky whisper laced with a quiet confidence that ignited an even deeper yearning within me. Her touch became more insistent, her fingers tracing patterns that set my senses ablaze. I could hear the pleasure in Emily's tone, the satisfaction she took in the way I was responding to her. Her lips returned to mine, capturing me in another deep, heated kiss that left me breathless. My entire body trembled under the intensity of it all, the slow, steady burn inside me building into something far greater, something overwhelming. Every touch, every kiss pushed me closer to the edge, and I could sense that she knew it too. Her fingers moved with more urgency, her body pressing tighter against mine, every inch of her fueling the fire between us. We were both lost in this moment, completely consumed by each other. The intensity of her touch, the way her lips explored my skin, the soft sounds of her breath against me, it was all too much. My body surrendered completely to her, giving in to the heat, to the undeniable desire that had overtaken us both. I could feel the tension coiling tighter and tighter inside me, every second bringing me closer to the breaking point. Her lips found my ear again, her breath warm and teasing as she whispered, "Let go, I want to feel it." Her words were all it took. With a soft groan I felt the tension inside me snap, waves of pleasure crashing over me as I gave in completely to her. To the moment my whole body trembled, every muscle tightening as the release swept through me, overwhelming and absolute. My breath hitched in my throat, coming in ragged gasps as wave after wave of sensation crashed over me. Emily's arms tightened around me, her fingers tracing soothing patterns on my skin, guiding me through the storm of release. Her lips found my neck, my cheek, my mouth, leaving a trail of soft, lingering kisses. Her warm breath whispered against my ear, her voice a low, calming melody that eased the tension, knotting my muscles. Her body pressed flush against mine, radiated comforting heat that melted away the last vestiges of anxiety, leaving behind a serene stillness. The exam room, once sterile and cold, now thrummed with a newfound intimacy. They Air crackled with unspoken emotions and my skin tingled with the lingering ghost of pleasure as I sank back against the table, desperate for air. Emily remained close, her touch a gentle weight on my chest, her eyes pools of tenderness and understanding met mine, sending a shiver of longing through me. We stayed like that for a heartbeat, suspended in time, the silence between us not empty but full, brimming with the weight of our shared experience, a undeniable connection forged in the heat of the moment. Words felt superfluous, unnecessary. We had spoken a language older than words, creating a bond that transcended the ordinary. I shouldn't have, Emily began, her voice barely a whisper laced with uncertainty, but I reached for her, silencing her with a touch. No, I said, my voice firm despite the tremor in my chest. I don't regret it, not for a second, and it was true despite the whirlwind of emotions, the tangled web of our circumstances. I couldn't bring myself to wish it undone. The sheer intensity of what we shared, the way she made me feel it was a truth I couldn't deny. A hesitant smile bloomed on her lips, her eyes softening with relief. She leaned in, pressing one last feet hurl kiss to my lips, her breath a warm caress. Neither do I, she murmured, her voice heavy with sincerity. The confession whispered in the quiet intimacy of the room shattered the last of my reservations. The tension that had clung to us like a shroud evaporated, placed by a comforting warmth that wrapped around us both. It was a silent understanding, a shared secret that bound us together as we stood there bathed in the afterglow of our passion. I knew that something fundamental had shifted between us, an invisible thread had been woven, connecting us in a way that couldn't be undone. The future was uncertain, the path ahead unclear, but in that moment all that mattered was the undeniable truth of our connection.